This here is a hay cutter. We go around with that. He would basically cut the hay, and then we had a baler to come up behind it and baled it. Those were like 40 pounds. I started working in the hayfield at 11 years old. You lift the bale of hay up with your arm and your knee, and you would have to throw it up. You got two guys on top stacking the hay, and we would put it in barns or old slave shacks that was people moved out of. And that was all day long. And you got an 11-year-old skinny kid, and I was 11 years old, I must have weighed 110 pounds. Most of the football players at school, they had no idea how strong I was. I didn't play football, I was a band guy. So you can imagine what happened to the surprise. I know that's chopping cotton in the spring. So what you do is that you have a hole. It's about that wide, and it's gauged for purpose to be that wide. Because what you're doing then is you chop all that down, you skip the same length of the hole, and then you chop the others. And you don't even have to look. It becomes a rhythm. That's the way it was done. It's called chopping cotton. When I was doing it, we got $3.15 per day, starting at 9 years old. Now, if you are a sharecropper, you teach the kids to do it around 7, because that hole is very sharp, because you want to make a clean cut. But if you was a day laborer, you got the same pay as a grown man. 35 cents an hour, $3.15 a day for 5 days a week. So you can imagine a man's got 3 sons and his wife, and they're hiring out as day laborers. They're doing pretty good. And of course, these kids didn't get that money. Parents got that money. And of course, you know, at the end of the week on Saturday evening, after you done all your chores and took care of all the animals, you was a teenager, you would get on the wagon and head to Natchitoches, maybe go to the movies. Because out of the $15.75, you would take $5 and you would go to town, you would buy you some shoes, you would buy you some pants, a shirt, because you would begin to buy and stock for your school clothes, you know. So that was basically the life, you know, be able to make the money, and then the parents would share the revenue, and the rest of it would go toward taking care of the family. This is your typical plantation store. They would sell sausage was called Three Little Pigs, I'll never forget it. It was like a big Vienna sausage, and the company was out of Homer, Louisiana. You couldn't get Three Little Pig sausage in a supermarket in Natchitoches, because he only sold a lot of this stuff to plantation stores, because a lot of it had to be able to preserve. When you open that can of sausage, it's preserved in the grease. So you didn't have to refrigerate it. And when it's empty, you can use the grease for whatever you want to use it for, frying or whatever. Also, they had Steen's ribbon cane syrup from South Louisiana, where they raised sugar cane, and they would make this raw syrup. So we would buy that by the gallon. So you would make flapjacks and you would eat syrup, and we had a lousy diet. And that was, you know, because you would eat all this sugar, and you would buy sugar by 25-pound sacks. You took those sacks and made girls' clothes, along with flour. And a lot of the companies realized that, and they began to put flowers on them, put other little diagrams on them. We didn't buy much meal because we got our own corn and we created our own meal. But if you wanted flour, you had to get it by 25-pound minimum sacks. And this is obviously in the 60s, whereas a black man would be a clerk in the store. There were no way in the 50s a black man would have that job. What I see missing here is the canister of cookies. We used to have big canisters like that, plastic, and these cookies were like 2 for 1 penny. There's a story behind that. We was living in Melrose, and my older brother, he's 5 years older than me, my sister gave him $1 to go to the store to get a pack of cigarettes and one or two other items, but he was supposed to bring back at least 50 cents worth of change. And of course, she gave him a nickel to get him a few cookies. So he went to the store and he had all this money in his hand, like 55 cents. So he told the guy, give me the rest in cookies. He's 7, 9 years old. He had no idea how big that was going to be. You ordered 50 cents worth of 2 for a penny cookies. So the guy is giving him bags, and he gave him 2 big bags of cookies. He didn't realize what was happening to him. He going, oh my God. He didn't stop. He just took all the cookies and he was biting out the cookies, throwing it over here, and they could follow him to New Mexico eating cookies. And when he got back home, he hid cookies under the bed. He had cookies everywhere. So my sister said, where's my change? He says, he didn't give me any change. So my sister went back to the store and she asked the guy, why did you cheat my little brother? The guy said, this kid left here with all the cookies I had. Well, he says that you didn't give him any change. Well, no, there was no change coming because you asked for the rest in cookies, but he wasn't dare going to tell my sister that he spent all the money on cookies. So her and that guy got into a big mess. As she was coming back home, she was seeing cookies. And she said, where all these cookies come from? Because she figured, he got 100 cookies. He's got to do something with them. So she come back and she found where he had all the cookies here, and then she had to go back down and apologize to the guy. That was amazing. We talk about it now. That was the worst trouble he ever got in. Out of all the trouble he's been in. 100 cookies, and he couldn't tell anybody. He couldn't share them. He just had to eat them until she found them. That looks like cotton behind him there. Looks like he got his sack around him, he got it rolled up. And he's got his bucket there, he's got either water or whatever he's got with him there. But he's headed to the field. Once you go to the field, you go to the field. Now he's got boots on. That to me is not normal, unless it's muddy. Because you don't wear boots in the field. It's hot enough. Every plantation used to have their own gin. And as I drive down Cane River, I hate to see the gins that are still standing. Most of them are just allowing to fall down. I'm saying, why? Those are historic structures. The few that's left, most of them just got torn down and hauled off. But the few that's left, we need to preserve them. Especially ones down at Taipo, down Bermuda. As you go down, you got Lom Gin. It's still standing, but they're letting them just go away. But those are typical workers in a gin. My father worked in one. That's a typical guy who's operating a gin. That could be my father or any other of the plantation black guys who moved from driving the tractors to working in the gin. It all paid the same. $5 a day driving the tractor, $5 a day working in the gin. All the owners up and down Cane River Plantation had a union. They all paid exactly the same. They paid exactly the same for gathering pecans, picking cotton, chopping cotton, hauling hay, pulling corn. It paid exactly the same. So it was no benefit to you to leave one plantation and go to another. That looks like Taipo Gin from looking outside and looking around it. And my father worked in Taipo Gin, which Taipo Gin was the Clutches Gin. Manu Clucci, he owned the gin. The Prudhoms had a gin. The Larms had a gin. J.H. and R.B. Williams had a gin. Jad Pratt had a gin. And as you go down Cane River, the Henrys had a gin. The Herzogs had a gin. Because they had so much cotton that they all had their own gins, because what happened is that it cost money to process that cotton. And if you didn't have a gin, that went a lot of your profits. It looks like getting it out of the press, and they're basically putting the burlap around it to be shipped. That was all hand done. Now you bring it out and you weigh it, and then you mark it. because what you got is pressed cotton, the seeds are out, it is 100% cotton, and it's clean and it's pressed. Now it's going to be shipped to wherever you're shipping it to. Usually over to the Carolinas, that's where they usually had all the textile operations going. And that operation there was a big operation. That means one guy could come up from wherever with a truck and pick up everybody's cotton, because it's all marked. See, it's not like you get it all mixed up. And once he get to the market, the checks were sent to whoever. But you wanted to weigh it at your site before he left. And it's not that you didn't trust anybody, but the fact of the matter that you need to know. And these guys here are the guys who work in the gin, handling the cotton. It was a big operation working in the gin. Matter of fact, that was what you would call a inside good job on the plantation if you got to work in the gin. Because you went out in the cold and rain, you were in the gin, you worked in the gin, and you kept it going, you did maintenance on the gin. There was some skilled workers in the gin, because all that stuff had to be maintained. It's not like it just ran itself. And that is a typical operation there. And you see that's 100% black. And of course, 50 cents an hour. Everybody paid the same.